there, today I'd like to show you how I created this silhouette tree on an acrylic pour. I had the original acrylic pour and I do quite a lot of these, so I sometimes have a look at them and I think, well, this one could do with a little bit of something. And I adored the silhouette colours that were in this particular pour, the yellows and the pinks and the blues. I just thought it looked fantastic. As I had used some silicone within the original pour, I'd cleaned the surface with some glass cleaner just to degrease it. And then the first thing that I'm putting on here is just a very rough base layer of where I want my headland, whatever you'd like to call it, to be. And this is just to make sure that I can cover the paint over the background pour, and that I'd cleaned it sufficiently with the glass cleaner to get rid of any last remaining silicone oil. So that's all I'm doing here, and I'm starting to hint at perhaps some suggestions. I want this to look like a tree in a bank on the other side of some water. That's kind of what I've got in my mind, but with the silhouette colours behind it. So I'm putting in this very rough layer. I'm actually using the same pouring paint as I had used. I thought that would sit quite nicely on top of the original pouring paint that I had. And then that was allowed to dry before I continued. Just adding in a few details just so I understand where I'm going. And now that background layer has dried and I know I can paint over it, I'm using, obviously you can see here, a much thicker layer of the acrylic pouring paint. And I've got a little cocktail stick here, and all I'm doing is pushing the paint around. So in some places I'm scraping it out to create some light grasses, and I'm also pulling the paint around to create some darker grasses within there. So I'm sort of sgraffitoing into the paint here a little bit. It's much easier to do that with a cocktail stick than it is to do it with a paintbrush. You get a much finer mark, so I quite like doing those. Just building up the texture and the grasses of my bank here. I adore the colours in this pour. I think it's a beautiful one. Suggesting a few sort of things in the water, maybe a couple of little rocks or bits of grass poking out within the water, just trying to give it a bit of interest really. Again, the paint I'm using here is the pouring paint, the same make of pouring paint, and I tend to work with Pebio's pre-mixed pouring paints. I find them just very reliable, very easy to pour. The colours are stunning, and I don't have to think about it. I just know it's going to work. I don't need to start looking at formulas and recipes and everything else. I just know this is going to work. So I'm very happy using that Pebio pre-mixed pouring paints. Now I decided here just to bring my bank just down slightly. I just felt it worked better, just slightly adjusting what I'd done before. And you can see I'm just using this paint quite thickly. It's kind of straight out of the bottle really at this point. Now I probably shouldn't say this to you because once you see it you can't unsee it, but just underneath my hand, when my hand moves across to the left, there's a little face peeking out. Oh, there it is. And there's the face again. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. So just making sure I get a thick enough coverage. It's kind of a self-leveling paint, so it will flatten itself out. A few more grasses poking out the top. So I'm quite happy with that, the distance and the way it kind of fades away. I love that little yellow bit on the right hand side. Don't know what I think it is, but I like it. So now I've got that settled and I'm quite happy with that, I'm going to put my tree in, and I'm starting at the base of the tree and I'm going to let it grow up the page. And I'm just pulling away from the trunk, and as I do so my brush is getting higher and higher away from the surface so that the branches get thinner and thinner as they come away from the trunk. But the beauty of this, the base is completely dry, so as and where and when, if I get too much I can just wipe it away. Just grounding my trunk. And then just using my stick just to draw a few things out. I'm trying to be very careful that I don't stick my fist in the bit that I've just painted because it's not dry yet. I could have waited for it to dry, but I'm too impatient. Again, just trying to create some twigs that are a bit random in shape, that go in lots of different directions. Trees aren't sort of smooth and natural most of the time anyway, so you have to kind of try and create these little random breaks and twists within it. Just takes a few minutes to patiently work your way around the tree. Definitely less is more when it comes to painting trees. If you actually looked at a tree, it would have a lot more branches and trunks that I'm putting in here, and sometimes it is knowing when to stop, because it's very easy just to keep going because you know there's thousands of branches. It's about perception. You just need to put enough in there for your mind to read it as a tree. And again, you can scratch back into this to give some texture onto the trunk, which is quite nice. And whilst I've got the stick, I'm just going to put my reflection in, so I'm just marking, so I'm going up just to mark where I want that tree to come to, so it does look like it actually silhouettes and reflects where the tree is going. It depends on whether you see this as a mill pond reflection, in which case the tree would be pretty much mirrored exactly, or whether you see it as I do on this one, where it's kind of got some ripples on the water. It's a suggestion of a reflection. I'd like my tree to have a few leaves on it. I don't think this is a full summer tree. I think this is kind of an autumnal tree that's got some leaves left on there, but you can still see through to the colours behind it. That's what I wanted to achieve. Just brushing this out a little bit, like I say, just to make it feel a little bit softer. The pour that I'm using isn't mirrored exactly, so I don't want to have an exact mirror reflection. And I'm just using dots and dabs, sometimes the tip of the brush, and sometimes I'm using the side of the brush. I'm just doing the dabs with different consistencies of paint, so some of them are a little bit more solid and some of them end up being a little bit more transparent. Coming back and layering things up a little bit. I hope you've enjoyed watching this very brief embellishing of an acrylic pour. Thank you for joining me.